I Can't Help Falling in Love with a Fox Girl Part 2. Kasia decided the situation had gone on long enough. In her opinion, two emotionally confused people circling each other quietly for days was not romantic. It was inefficient. And Kasia hated inefficiency. Robert should have recognized danger the moment Kasia appeared at breakfast unusually cheerful. That expression never meant peace. It meant plans. Bad ones. She sat down across from him with a grin already forming. Good morning, emotionally repressed people. Robert immediately sighed. No. Lyra nearly choked on her drink. Pepper closed her eyes slowly like someone preparing for impact. Naomi calmly buttered toast. Kasia pointed between Robert and Lyra dramatically. I have made a decision. Robert pointed at himself. Why am I involved already? Because this concerns you. That's worse. Kasia ignored him completely. Tonight, she announced proudly, we are having music night. Pepper frowned slightly. We already had karaoke. Kasia waved dismissively. No. This is different. Naomi looked up. How? Kasia grinned wider. More targeted. Robert immediately stood up. I'm leaving. Lyra instinctively grabbed his sleeve before he could escape. Wait. Both of them froze slightly afterward. Lyra slowly released his sleeve. Kasia saw everything. Oh my God! She whispered dramatically. Lyra's ears flattened instantly. Kasia, don't. I didn't even say anything yet. You were about to. Correct. Later that morning, Pepper cornered Kasia near rehearsal storage. You are planning something. Kasia looked innocent. Maybe. That answer alone is concerning. Kasia leaned closer conspiratorially. They like each other. Pepper sighed. Yes, Kasia. Everyone on this ship knows. Including them? Pepper paused. Less certain? Kasia pointed triumphantly. Exactly. So I'm helping. Pepper folded her arms. The last time you helped, Lyra almost died from embarrassment. Kasia looked thoughtful. Fair. Then smiled again immediately. But worth it. Pepper groaned softly. That evening the band gathered in one of the smaller rehearsal lounges instead of the main stage room. Warm lighting. Soft music. Relaxed atmosphere. Too relaxed? Robert noticed immediately. This feels like a trap. Kasia smiled. That's because it is. I appreciate the honesty. Lyra sat beside him this time instead of across the room. Not intentionally. Probably. Her tail rested quietly beside her chair, though it flicked occasionally whenever Robert spoke directly to her. Kasia noticed every single time. Of course she did. Kasia started first with That's Amore. Naturally. She turned the performance into complete chaos immediately, dramatically spinning around the room while Naomi quietly played backup rhythm on the table. Pepper followed with Stand By Me, calmer and smoother, her wolf ears twitching slightly with the beat. Naomi surprised everyone again with At Last, singing with soft control that somehow made the entire room quiet down. Then Kasia looked toward Robert. Dangerously. Okay. Robert narrowed his eyes. No. Yes. No. Yes. Lyra quietly hid a smile behind her drink. Traitor. Kasia grabbed the music console before Robert could object further. Robert frowned immediately. That sound means violence. Kasia gasped. I would never. Then she selected a song. The opening melody filled the room. Soft. Slow. Warm. Robert immediately recognized it. Kasia. Kasia looked innocent again. What? Can't Help Falling in Love. Lyra went completely still beside him. Pepper looked toward the ceiling like she was already exhausted. Naomi quietly whispered. An aggressive selection. Kasia pointed proudly. Thank you. Robert rubbed his face tiredly. You absolutely chose this on purpose. Kasia grinned. I have no idea what you mean. You're a terrible liar. Correct. Lyra finally spoke softly beside him. You don't have to if you're uncomfortable. Robert looked toward her. And immediately made a mistake. Because she was looking at him with that soft expression again. The one that made rational thinking harder than it should be. Robert exhaled slowly. I'm blaming all of you for this. Kasia pointed finger guns at him. Accepted. Robert stood reluctantly while the instrumental played. He still hated being watched. Even now. Even with just them. But then he glanced toward Lyra again. And her ears lifted slightly in encouragement. That helped more than it should have. So he sang. Softly at first. Then more naturally as the song continued. Wise men say. The room quieted again. Because Robert didn't sing like someone performing. He sang like someone meaning every word accidentally. Which was somehow worse. Lyra's tail immediately started moving again. Slow at first. Then steadily faster the longer he sang. Kasia saw it, and physically grabbed Pepper's arm. Look! I have eyes. Robert noticed neither of them. Because somewhere during the second verse, Lyra quietly started singing with him. Not planned. Not performance. Just instinct. Their voices blended together surprisingly well. Warm against warm. Soft against soft. And suddenly the room felt much smaller. Pepper slowly lowered her drink. Naomi blinked once. Kasia looked seconds away from exploding. Then Robert looked toward Lyra during the chorus. And Lyra completely lost control of her tail. Fast. Happy. Unstoppable. Kasia collapsed backward onto the couch laughing silently. Pepper covered her face. Naomi calmly took another sip of tea. Fascinating. Lyra noticed everyone staring and immediately hid her face with both hands. I hate all of you. Kasia wheezed from the couch. No, you don't. When the song ended, the room stayed quiet for a moment. Not awkward. Just full. Robert sat back down slowly beside Lyra. Neither looked directly at the other immediately. Then Kasia sat upright suddenly like she remembered something dangerous. Oh! Pepper immediately pointed at her. No. Kasia ignored her completely. I almost forgot. That sentence terrified everyone. Kasia grinned proudly. Tomorrow we arrive at Mars Station. The room shifted slightly at those words. First venue of the tour. First concert. First real crowd since the attack. Robert's posture changed subtly. Lyra noticed instantly. Kasia noticed that too. And then, because she was Kasia, she smiled mischievously. And Robert is coming to soundcheck with us. Robert blinked. I'm sorry, what? Lyra looked equally surprised. Kasia pointed dramatically. You need exposure therapy. I need less exposure. Too bad. Pepper sighed deeply. Why are you like this? Kasia grinned proudly. Because I'm right. And honestly? That was the worst part. She probably was. Mars Station. The announcement came early in the morning cycle. The captain's calm voice echoed softly throughout the tour ship. Attention passengers and crew. Mars Station will be within visual range in approximately 1 hour. That immediately changed the energy on board. Crew members moved faster. Equipment cases rolled through corridors. Stage teams checked inventory lists one last time. And somewhere on the ship, Kasia was already causing problems. Robert arrived at one of the ship's common lounges to find the girls already there. Kasia lounged across an entire couch dramatically. Pepper sat reviewing security overlays. Naomi quietly drank tea. Lyra stood near the holographic television adjusting channels. The moment Robert walked in, Lyra's ears lifted slightly. Small. Automatic. But noticeable. Robert noticed too. Which only made her tail flick once before she quickly sat down. Kasia saw all of it immediately. Of course she did. Good morning, emotionally complicated people. Robert sighed. You wake up evil every day. It's a gift. Lyra hid a smile. Naomi calmly added. It is statistically consistent. Pepper rubbed her forehead. Please don't encourage her. Lyra activated the holographic television to distract everyone before Kasia escalated further. The screen expanded outward into the center of the room. The default channel appeared automatically. Mars Station News 1. A reporter stood outside the massive concert complex beneath glowing red and gold station lights. Behind him, thousands of people crowded the streets. Fans, banners, music, excitement. The camera swept across the gathering crowd. And then Robert froze. Because mixed among the echoes of Terra signs were signs about him. Huge ones. Robert Clark, be my protector too. Marry me, Robert. Knife guy saved my heart. I love you, Robert Clark. Protective men are hot. Robert stared in horror. What? Kasia immediately folded over, laughing. Pepper physically lowered her security tablet to stare at the screen. Even Naomi blinked twice. That escalated quickly, Naomi observed calmly. The news camera continued sweeping through the crowd. A group of feline women screamed toward the camera while holding signs with Robert's name covered in glitter. Another group held a massive banner that read, Robert Clark Fan Club, Mars Chapter. Robert looked physically exhausted already. I made mistakes. Kasia was laughing so hard she nearly slid off the couch. Oh my God, look at them. I am looking against my will. Pepper smirked slightly. You've become marketable. That is the worst sentence anyone has ever said to me. Then, all three girls slowly looked toward Lyra. At the same time, Lyra immediately narrowed her eyes. Don't. Kasia pointed toward the holographic screen where another woman blew kisses toward the camera while holding a sign saying, Robert can rescue me anytime. Kasia grinned dangerously. Well? Lyra's ears flattened instantly. Kasia leaned sideways dramatically toward Pepper and Naomi while stage whispering loudly. I think someone's jealous. I am not jealous. Her tail betrayed her immediately. Fast, irritated flicking. Pepper calmly looked at the tail. You absolutely are. I am not. Naomi sipped tea quietly. You are displaying territorial body language. Lyra looked genuinely distressed. Why is everyone analyzing me today? Kasia pointed at the television again. Because apparently half of Mars wants your emotionally confused engineer. Robert immediately raised a hand. I would like to formally resign from public existence. Lyra crossed her arms slightly. Too late. Then quieter. Almost accidentally. She added. Besides, I saw him first. The room went silent for 1 full second. Lyra realized what she said. Kasia exploded. Pepper turned away instantly to hide laughter. Naomi calmly whispered. Direct territorial declaration confirmed. Lyra covered her face with both hands while her tail completely lost composure behind her. Robert stared at her. And somehow that made her blush even harder. An hour later the ship entered visual range. Mars Station filled the viewing windows like a glowing artificial city suspended above the red planet below. Massive docking rings rotated slowly around the structure. Thousands of lights shimmered across the station exterior. Freight lanes and civilian traffic moved constantly around it. Robert stepped closer to the observation glass. Okay, he admitted quietly. That's impressive. Lyra smiled softly beside him. First time seeing Mars Station? Robert nodded. It's bigger than I imagined. Kasia grinned. Wait until you see the concert district. Pepper folded her arms. And the security nightmare. That too, Kasia admitted. The arena was enormous. Far larger than the venue from the attack. Robert noticed immediately how differently Pepper moved here. More alert. More focused. More protective. Professional. Security crews coordinated constantly across the massive structure while technicians rushed around preparing lighting and sound systems. Kasia spun slowly in the center of the empty stage dramatically. I love giant venues. Pepper immediately replied. I hate giant venues. Naomi nodded calmly. Both statements are reasonable. Lyra walked beside Robert, while crews adjusted microphones around them. "You okay?" she asked quietly. Robert looked around the massive empty seating sections. "Currently, yes." "Currently? I'm trying not to think about how many people will be in here tonight." Lyra's ears softened slightly. Then she gently bumped his shoulder with hers. "You'll be fine." Robert looked at her. That sounded suspiciously confident. She smiled faintly. "Because I trust you." That hit harder than she intended. And judging by her suddenly wagging tail, she realized it immediately afterward. Kasia saw that from across the stage and nearly died again. Incognito. A few hours later, Robert and Lyra slipped into one of the lower commercial sectors of Mars Station wearing casual clothing and hooded jackets. Pepper had reluctantly allowed it after Robert promised to stay alert, though she clearly regretted everything already. The station streets glowed with layered neon signs and reflected red lighting from the planet below. Music drifted through open storefronts while crowds moved through the massive enclosed district. For once, they were almost anonymous. Almost. Lyra kept her ears lowered beneath her hood while Robert stayed close beside her through the crowd. Eventually they stopped outside a small old-fashioned music store tucked between larger shops. Robert immediately noticed it. "Wait." Lyra looked over. "What?" He pointed toward the shop window. Inside, among old instruments and restored media equipment, sat a dusty vinyl record with no label. No title. No visible markings. Just age. Robert slowly stepped closer to the glass. Lyra noticed the look in his eyes immediately. "You found something." Robert nodded slowly. "Maybe." And somehow, that small old record suddenly felt important. The music shop's bell chimed softly as they stepped back into the corridor outside. Mars Station's inner district was alive around them, neon reflections sliding across glass walls, distant crowd noise pulsing like a second heartbeat through the structure. Robert walked slightly slower than before. Not tired. Just thinking. Lyra noticed, but didn't comment immediately. They moved with the flow of people until Robert stopped near a quieter junction and pulled out his communicator. "I should check in," he said. Lyra tilted her head slightly. "With who?" Robert glanced at her briefly. "Lynn." That made Lyra pause for half a second, then she nodded. "Okay." He stepped a little aside, thumbed the call open, and waited. It connected quickly. Lynn's voice came through almost immediately. "You're alive. Good start." Robert exhaled. "That's your greeting?" "It's accurate." He leaned lightly against the wall of the corridor. "We made it to Mars Station." A short pause. "You sound too calm for someone who just said that," Lynn replied. "I haven't gone to the concert yet." "Ah. That explains it." Robert glanced toward Lyra, who was pretending not to listen but absolutely was. "They're performing tonight," he said. "Echoes of Terra." That got Lynn's attention. "Oh? Big venue?" "Very." Another pause. Then Lynn's tone softened slightly. "You okay with that?" Robert thought about it honestly. "Yeah," he said. "I think so." A faint hum of approval on the other end. "Good." Then she added, "You've been gone long enough that I had to reorganize your entire kitchen system notes." "That sounds illegal." "It was necessary." That got a small smile out of him. "Fair." Then he hesitated. "How's your week been?" There was a beat of silence on the line. "Quiet," Lynn said finally. "Too quiet." Robert understood that immediately. "Yeah," he said softly. "Same here." Another pause. Then Lynn's voice returned to her usual tone. "Don't get stabbed again." "I wasn't planning to." "Try harder." Robert shook his head slightly, amused. "I will." A short silence lingered, comfortable, familiar. Then, "I'll check in after the show," he said. "Do that," Lynn replied. "And don't ignore me if I call first." "I wouldn't dare." "Good." The call ended. Robert lowered the communicator and slipped it back into his pocket. Lyra was watching him now. Not intensely. Just quietly attentive. Everything okay? She asked. He nodded. Yeah. She just wanted an update. Lyra hesitated. That your sister? Robert blinked once. Then shook his head. No. She's not my sister. A pause. He corrected gently. We're not related. Just close. Lyra nodded slowly. Right. Then softer. You talk to her like she matters. She does. That made something in Lyra's expression shift slightly, but she didn't comment further. Instead, she looked back toward the corridor ahead. Does that record work? Robert exhaled lightly, like the question pulled him back into focus. No, he admitted. I tried earlier. Nothing yet. Lyra nodded. That's okay. I'll try again between planets, he added. It might just need more restoration time. Or patience, she said. Robert gave her a faint look. I prefer technical explanations. That made her smile. They rejoined the others a few minutes later. Kasia immediately leaned forward like she had been waiting the entire time. So? Robert sighed. No. Kasia ignored him. Did you meet any feline girls from the broadcast? Pepper immediately groaned. Kasia. Naomi quietly sipped tea. Kasia continued anyway. Any fans declare eternal devotion? Any dramatic romantic offers? Any spontaneous marriage proposals? Robert stared at her. I was in a music store. Kasia nodded seriously. So yes. That is not what I said. Kasia pointed toward Lyra. Did Lyra have to bite anyone? Lyra choked slightly. I did not bite anyone. Kasia raised a hand. Or subtly threaten them with tail-based intimidation? Lyra's ears flattened instantly. That also did not happen. Kasia leaned back. Just checking. Pepper rubbed her forehead. You are exhausting. Kasia smiled sweetly. I know. Then she added, glancing between Robert and Lyra. I'm joking, my. She stopped mid-sentence, clearly deciding not to finish whatever chaotic thought was forming. Instead, she waved a hand. Anyway. Tonight's going to be packed. Robert glanced toward the distant arena entrance visible through the station glass. The lights were already brightening. The crowd was already forming. And somewhere in that building, Echoes of Terra was about to play. Lyra followed his gaze for a moment, then quietly stepped slightly closer to his side without thinking about it. He noticed. Didn't comment. Just stayed there. And for now, that was enough. The corridors behind Mars Station's main concert arena were quieter than the outside chaos suggested. Too quiet, in a way that felt intentional. Robert followed a guided path toward the venue management office, hands in his pockets, expression neutral but observant, as always. The manager greeted him with practiced professionalism. Mr. Clark. I was told you had questions about facility security? Robert nodded once. Mostly engineering access points. Emergency doors. Maintenance shafts. The manager didn't hesitate. All engineering and emergency routes are secured with top-grade military-spec locking systems. Multi-layer authentication, biometric and code rotation. No single-point override. Robert raised an eyebrow slightly. Good. The manager added quickly, almost proudly. We also installed upgraded weapon detection systems at all main entry points and backstage corridors. Robert nodded again. Even better. A brief pause. Then, casually. My boss Pepper will be very happy to hear that. The manager blinked. Your boss? Robert corrected himself immediately. Security lead. Long story. Ah. Robert offered a hand. The manager shook it. Professional. Clean. Done. Robert found the girls gathered in a preparation lounge near the stage entrance. Costumes. Instruments. Last-minute tuning. Controlled chaos. Lyra looked up first when he entered. Kasia immediately looked suspicious. Pepper already looked like she expected bad news. Robert spoke plainly. I checked with venue management. Engineering and emergency access routes are fully secured. Military-grade systems. Weapon detection at all entry points. Pepper visibly relaxed a fraction. Good, she said. That reduces variables. Kasia leaned back. That's boringly responsible. Robert shrugged. I try. Lyra tilted her head slightly. You asked specifically about shafts? Security gaps. Robert corrected. Just in case. Pepper nodded once. That's exactly what I would have asked. Kasia pointed between them. You two are the same person in different fonts. Pepper didn't deny it. Robert didn't either. Lyra just smiled faintly at that. Naomi adjusted a small tablet displaying the performance flow. These are tonight's sets, she said calmly. The list extended long across the display. Only you. Put your head on my shoulder. Earth Angel, will you be mine? A kiss to build a dream on. All the way. That's amore. Love letters in the sand. I only have eyes for you. Can't help falling in love. At last. Stand by me. Crazy. This magic moment. Then he kissed me. I want to hold your hand. My girl. You've lost that lovin' feelin'. I can't stop loving you. You're my world. Endless love. Good vibrations. California dreamin'. Twist and shout. Dancing in the street. Sugar, sugar. Here comes the sun. Respect. Happy together. Kasia whistled low. That's a lot of emotional damage in one night. Pepper corrected. It's a structured emotional arc. Kasia nodded. So emotional damage with planning. Correct. Lyra quietly read through the list again. Robert noticed her expression shift slightly at certain songs. Not dramatic. Just reflective. Naomi looked up from the schedule. Our opening act will be Cosmic Nova. Robert glanced over. Same group from the ship? Naomi nodded. We observed their previous performance. Audience response metrics were strong. We invited them for this tour segment. Kasia grinned. You hired them because they were good? Yes. Kasia looked offended. That's illegal levels of reasonable. Robert smirked faintly. I saw part of their set last time. He added. They were solid. I'm looking forward to hearing more. Lyra noticed that. The small smile. She didn't comment. But she did look slightly more focused afterward. The deeper they moved towards stage readiness, the louder the outside world became. Through the reinforced walls, sound filtered in. Not music yet. People. Thousands of them. Gathering. Building. Then, chanting started. At first it was indistinct. Then it resolved into rhythm. Echoes of Terra! Echoes of Terra! A wave of sound rolled through the station. Kasia looked up. Well, she said casually. That's healthy enthusiasm. Then another chant layered in beneath it. Different. Closer. More personal. Robert Clark! Robert Clark! Pepper slowly turned her head toward Robert. You hear that too, right? Robert nodded once. Yes. Lyra's ears lowered slightly under her hood. Kasia immediately leaned toward her with a grin. Oh. Don't. I didn't say anything. You were about to. I wasn't. You were emotionally loading a comment. Kasia smiled innocently. I support your journey. Lyra covered her face slightly. Pepper sighed. Naomi observed calmly. The audience has expanded its focal interest beyond primary performers. Robert exhaled once. That's one way to put it. Outside. The chants kept growing. Louder. Stronger. Less like a crowd now. More like pressure building against a sealed door. And inside the backstage corridor, Robert stood slightly closer to the group without realizing it. Lyra noticed. Didn't move away. Kasia noticed that too. And smiled like she had just seen the beginning of something inevitable. The backstage screen flickered as Cosmic Nova finally took the stage. A burst of sound rolled through the venue, bright synth layers fused with guitar-driven energy, something that felt like it had been pulled from old Earth archives and rebuilt for a new era. Robert watched the feed with interest, arms folded. "Cosmic Nova just started," he said. Kasia leaned over from behind him. "And? I like their music," Robert replied. "It resembles 1980s rock." Pepper gave a small approving nod. "That's a fair classification," Naomi added calmly. "They maintain strong rhythmic consistency. Good opening act choice." Kasia grinned. "So he does approve of something musical." Robert glanced at her. "I approve of many things. Name 5. Engineering systems. Proper locks. Quiet corridors. Functional lighting. Not being interrogated." Kasia blinked. "I walked into that." The final song, Building Momentum. On the screen, Cosmic Nova reached their final track. The music built steadily, layered drums, rising synths, guitar lines tightening into something explosive. Robert straightened slightly. "Okay, this is actually good." Lyra glanced at him briefly. "You're impressed?" "It's tight," he admitted. "Clean transitions." Pepper crossed her arms. "They earned their place on the lineup then." Naomi nodded. "Yes." Kasia stretched her arms. "All right. Time for real chaos." Pepper sighed. "Please don't call it that." "I will absolutely continue calling it that." The stage transition. The final chord hit. Cosmic Nova ended their set with a sharp, controlled crescendo. Then, silence. A half-second pause. The arena lights dimmed all at once. Fog machines ignited across the entire stage surface, rolling thick white mist outward until the platform disappeared completely beneath it. Robert narrowed his eyes slightly. "That's a lot of fog," Pepper replied immediately. "It's intentional staging concealment for transition effect." Kasia leaned forward. "Oh, this is the good part." Then, fireworks erupted. Not outside the venue. Inside the stage structure itself. Vertical bursts of light exploded upward through the fog, painting the arena in gold and white flashes. The crowd outside roared instantly. That was the cue. Robert, the moment before. Robert stepped slightly closer to the group without thinking. Lyra noticed. Of course she did. He looked at them one by one. "Good luck," he said simply. "No speeches. No dramatics. Just steady." Lyra smiled softly. "Thanks." Kasia grinned and gave a two-finger salute. "Try not to faint from our talent." "I'll do my best." Pepper nodded once. "Stay alert." "I always am." Naomi offered a small, calm wave. "Performance probability, high success." Robert blinked once. "I appreciate the confidence." The walk to stage. The 4 girls moved toward the stage entrance. The fog swallowed their silhouettes as they stepped forward. Kasia's tail flicked once as she disappeared into the mist. Pepper's posture tightened into focus. Naomi adjusted her grip on her instrument. Lyra paused briefly at the edge. She looked back once. Just once. Robert caught it. And nodded slightly. Lyra's ears lifted just a fraction. Then she turned and stepped into the fog. Opening performance. The fog began to thin just enough for silhouettes to appear. Then, music. Soft guitar. Warm harmony. The first notes of "Put your head on my shoulder." Lyra's voice came in first, gentle, controlled, intimate in a way that immediately quieted the vast crowd. Kasia's bass followed, smooth and grounding. Pepper's guitar added structure. Naomi's drums entered softly, almost like a heartbeat. The arena shifted instantly. From noise to listening. Robert stood still behind the stage barrier. Arms lowered. Expression focused. Not as an engineer now. Not as security. Just someone watching something that mattered unfold in real time. Songs flowing into each other. The first set continued seamlessly. Earth Angel, Will You Be Mine? A Kiss to Build a Dream on All the Way That's Amore Love Letters and the Sandy Only Have Eyes for You. Each song blended into the next like memory becoming motion. Lyra's voice carried differently here. Not distant. Not recorded. Present. Alive. And every time she reached a softer line. Somewhere backstage. Robert unconsciously leaned in just slightly closer. Not noticing he was doing it. But Kasia, from the stage edge during transitions, absolutely did. And she smiled like someone watching a system gradually sink. The final note of the first set dissolved into applause so loud it felt like pressure against the walls. Lights shifted. The stage rotated its attention back outward. Cosmic Nova returned for the intermission set, already launching into a high-energy transition performance meant to keep the crowd alive while the main act reset. Backstage, the atmosphere loosened slightly. Not calm. Just less structured chaos. Robert met the girls just off the side corridor as they exited the stage wing. Lyra was still breathing lightly from performance energy. Kasia looked like she had just finished feeding off a crowd's emotions. Pepper was already scanning the next stage cues in her head. Naomi looked like nothing in the universe could disturb her internal rhythm. Robert gave a small nod. Great job so far tonight. Lyra smiled immediately. Thanks. Kasia pointed at him. You say that like you weren't watching us the whole time. I was monitoring stage flow. Robert replied automatically. Kasia grinned. Sure. Pepper crossed her arms. He was watching. Robert didn't deny it. That was mistake number one. The group moved into a shared dressing lounge near the main stage corridor. It was quieter here, soft lighting, comfortable seating, a faint hum of distant crowd noise still bleeding through the structure. Lyra turned toward Robert immediately. Stay with us for a bit? Robert hesitated just a fraction. Then nodded. All right. Kasia immediately flopped onto a nearby chair like she owned the room. Naomi sat with calm precision. Pepper leaned against a wall near the door, habitual positioning. Lyra, however, moved directly to the couch. And sat very close to Robert. Closer than necessary. Not touching. But close enough that the space between them suddenly felt optional. Robert blinked slightly. Okay. Lyra looked at him. You did good out there too. Robert gave a small shrug. I didn't do anything. You stayed, she said simply. That made him pause. That counts? Lyra nodded once. It does to us. Lyra shifted slightly on the couch. And Robert could have sworn. Her tail lightly brushed against his wrist for a brief moment, as she adjusted. It was subtle. Accidental. Probably. But it lingered just long enough for his brain to notice. Robert froze for half a second. Then slowly looked down. Lyra didn't seem to notice. Or pretended not to. Kasia absolutely noticed. Of course she did. A grin immediately spread across her face like a loaded weapon. Oh. Lyra stiffened instantly. Kasia, don't. Kasia leaned forward dramatically. I didn't say anything. You were about to. I was simply observing environmental, affection-based physics. Pepper closed her eyes. Naomi took a sip of water. Kasia continued. That was very scientifically affectionate tail behavior. Lyra's face turned immediately red. I hate you. No you don't, Kasia said cheerfully. You're just emotionally buffering. Robert quietly. I feel like I should leave. Lyra immediately reached out and grabbed his arm. Not aggressively. Not forcefully. Just instinctively. Don't. That was all she said. Then she realized what she was doing. And instead of letting go, she shifted closer and gently wrapped both arms around his right arm, leaning against it like it had suddenly become the most stable object in the room. Her face went completely cherry red. She did not look at anyone. Kasia went silent for half a second. Then, oh my God! Pepper exhaled slowly. Naomi nodded once. Confirmed bonding behavior. Lyra whispered into Robert's sleeve. Don't move. Robert very carefully. I wasn't planning to. Kasia leaned back dramatically. I support this. Pepper added, calm but firm. As long as it doesn't interfere with performance. Naomi. Emotional stability may improve output efficiency. Kasia pointed at Naomi. That's the most romantic thing you've ever said. Naomi blinked. I did not intend it romantically. That makes it worse. Robert looked down at Lyra, still holding his arm. Then at Kasia, grinning like chaos incarnate. Then at Pepper, pretending not to care but clearly observing everything. Then at Naomi, who was treating this like data validation. He exhaled slowly. This ship is not normal. Kasia nodded proudly. Correct. Lyra, still red. Ignore her. Kasia raised both hands. I am supporting you both in my own deeply annoying way. Pepper muttered. That is one way to describe it. Naomi calmly added. It is also accurate. Outside the dressing room, the sound of cosmic nova set pulsed through the station walls. Bright, energetic, alive. But inside, for a brief moment, it felt quieter. Not empty. Just focused. Lyra didn't let go of Robert's arm. And Robert didn't move away. Kasia watched them like she was witnessing the beginning of something inevitable. Pepper watched like she was calculating how long it would take before it became a logistical problem. Naomi watched like it was already solved data. And Lyra. Well, Lyra was still very red. But she didn't let go. And that said more than anything else in the room. A soft chime cut through the dressing room. Then the intercom voice. Intermission ending in 5 minutes. Performers return to stage positions. Kasia straightened immediately like she'd been waiting for that exact sentence. You heard him. Let's go. Robert, still half processing the situation from earlier, blinked. Go where? Kasia turned toward him with an expression that was far too innocent to be trusted. You don't want to disappoint your fans, do you? Robert frowned slightly. My fans? Kasia pointed vaguely toward the hallway. You've got an audience now. It's a package deal. Robert immediately shook his head. No. Lyra, still slightly close to him, looked up. Just go out and wave, she said softly. A pause. Then she smiled at him. Not teasing. Not performing. Just warm. That was enough to break his resistance. Fine. Robert sighed. Just a wave. Kasia clapped once. Perfect. Stage husband energy. Pepper muttered. That is not a category. Naomi added. It is now socially established. The group stepped out toward the main stage walkway. Lights shifted. The crowd was already rising, anticipating the return. And then Robert appeared at the edge of the stage. For half a second. Silence. Then the arena exploded. Not just applause. Recognition. Excitement. Something sharper. Robert hesitated slightly under the weight of it. Then lifted a hand. A simple wave. Controlled. Polite. His expression stayed calm, but the crowd interpreted it differently, reading confidence, warmth, presence. And then it got louder. A section of the audience, especially near the front rows, began calling out. And among them, Vulpine and Lupin women waving signs, shouting his name over the noise. Robert Clark! Look this way! Protector! I'll join your crew! He smiled. Robert's eye twitched slightly. Kasia, off to the side, was absolutely enjoying this. Pepper looked mildly exhausted. Naomi was observing like it was an emergent behavioral pattern. Lyra, however, was watching him more than the crowd. Robert gave one last controlled smile, carefully practiced now. Not fully real. But effective. The kind the crowd liked. Then he turned to exit. That's your cue, Pepper said. Gladly, Robert replied. But before he could fully step back, Lyra moved. Fast. She reached out, grabbed his hand, and pulled him gently toward her. Not forceful. But certain. Then she hugged him. Right there. On the edge of the stage. A clear, unambiguous gesture. Not performative. Not staged. Something quieter. Something personal. The crowd saw it immediately through the live feed. Cash's voice cracked through backstage comms. Did she just do that? Then she laughed. Oh, that's why you were okay with him coming on stage. Lyra, still holding Robert for half a second longer than necessary, whispered. Just go. Her ears were bright red. Robert's face followed immediately. Right. He stepped back quickly and exited the stage like the floor had suddenly become optional. Kasha was still laughing as he disappeared. Pepper shook her head. Naomi simply noted. Confirmed emotional deviation from baseline behavior. Lyra turned back toward the stage as the applause surged again. She took position at the microphone. Still slightly flushed. Still slightly off-center emotionally. Kasha leaned in. You good? Lyra didn't look at her. Start the song. Kasha grinned. Gladly. The opening notes of Only You softened the entire arena instantly. Lyra's voice came in. And something about it had changed. Not technically. Not structurally. But emotionally. It carried something tighter. More focused. Less distant. And as the lyrics flowed through the stadium, the performance felt less like a song to the audience, and more like it was directed at a single point somewhere off stage. Kasha noticed immediately. Pepper noticed too. Naomi simply stated, Targeted emotional resonance detected. Kasha smirked. Yeah. That's definitely aimed at him. Lyra didn't confirm it. But she didn't deny it either. And somewhere backstage, Robert paused for half a second while walking away from the stage exit. Because he heard it too. And kept walking anyway. The encore of Only You faded into its final silence. For a moment, the arena didn't react. It held the moment. Then the applause came, steady at first, then rising into something full and unwilling to end. The girls stepped forward in unison. Kasha smiled into her mic. Thank you. Pepper followed, calm and precise. Thank you for coming to Echoes of Terra. Naomi gave a small bow. Good night. Lyra lingered just a fraction longer. Then she bowed too. And the lights began to dim. Backstage lights guided them toward the exit route. Robert was already waiting at the edge of the stage corridor, ready to escort them back to the tour's ship. Professional. Quiet. Steady as always. The girls began walking toward him. Pepper first. Kasha behind her, still energized. Naomi at a calm pace. Lyra last. But when Lyra got about 10 feet away, she stopped. Just stopped. She took a breath like she was making a decision she had already made earlier but hadn't acted on yet. Then she suddenly walked faster. Then ran the last few steps. And hugged Robert again. Right there in the open corridor. No hesitation this time. Robert froze slightly, then carefully returned the hug. Lyra looked up at him. How did we do? Robert blinked once. Then smiled a little. You were great, he said. I really liked Only You. That did it. Lyra's face went instantly deep red. Robert followed a second later, realizing what he had just admitted out loud in that exact tone. Kasha, already watching from behind Pepper, made a quiet sound like she was physically restraining laughter. Lyra stayed close for a second longer than necessary. Then softer. We should spend more time together, she said. To understand each other better. A pause. Then she added, almost carefully. I like where this is going. Robert hesitated. Then nodded. Me too. The walk back to the ship was quieter than the concert itself. Not awkward. Just different. Like something had been acknowledged without fully being defined yet. Later that night, the ship settled into its night cycle. Robert had barely gotten a moment to decompress when Pepper approached him near the corridor. Robert, she said. Come with me. We need to talk. He nodded once. All right. Pepper closed the door behind them. Sit, she said. Robert did. She sat opposite him, direct, composed, not unkind. But serious in a way she rarely showed. I need to know something, she said. Robert frowned slightly. Okay. Pepper studied him for a moment. Do you have permanent intentions regarding Lyra? That landed differently than he expected. He didn't answer immediately. Pepper continued, her tone steady. There's a reason I'm asking. Vulpine kin, lupin kin, and feline kin share something important culturally. Robert listened. Pepper didn't soften it. They bond for life when they choose a partner. A pause. That isn't metaphorical to them. It's commitment in the strongest sense they have. Robert's expression shifted slightly. Pepper held his gaze. I don't think it will be long before Lyra commits emotionally in that direction. A beat. So I need to know, are you capable of matching that, or is this temporary for you? Robert exhaled slowly. I'm not someone who treats people like temporary, he said quietly. If I choose something like that, it means something permanent to me too. Pepper watched him carefully. Old-fashioned, she said. Apparently. Another pause. Then Robert added, if Lyra feels that way about me, I would be proud to be hers. Pepper nodded once. That seemed to satisfy her. Good. She leaned back slightly. Because she's kind. And she's talented. And you've probably noticed, she's also very beautiful. Robert looked away slightly at that. Pepper didn't tease him. She just continued. If you choose each other, you don't get to half-step it. You either show up fully, or you don't start. Robert nodded. I understand. Pepper stood. I think you do. A small pause. Then, more softly. You're a good man, Robert Clark. Just don't waste that. She walked to the door. I'm tired. I'll see you at breakfast. Robert stood as well. See you then, Pepper. The door closed. And for the first time since the encore, the silence felt heavier. Not uncomfortable. Just meaningful. The corridors of the tour's ship were mostly silent by the time Robert finally headed back to his room. The concert adrenaline had faded into exhaustion. His shoulders ached. His legs felt heavy. And his mind was still trying to process everything that had happened in a single night. Especially Lyra. Robert exhaled quietly as he reached his door. I'd better call Lynn, he muttered to himself. She's probably dying from curiosity by now. The soft glow of his room lights illuminated the small record player near the wall while Robert sat down in front of it and activated the holocall. A moment later Lynn appeared over the projector. The second she saw him, she grinned. There he is. Mars celebrity himself. Robert sighed immediately. Please don't start. Oh no, Lynn said. I absolutely watched the concert. Robert leaned back in his chair. All of it? All of it, she confirmed proudly. And before you ask, yes, you looked terrified when the crowd started screaming for you. I was. Lynn laughed loudly. I could tell. Robert shook his head. I still don't understand why they like me. You protected a famous singer from getting stabbed on live media feeds, Lynn replied. People love dramatic heroes. I'm not a hero. You literally took a knife for somebody. Robert rubbed his face. Fair. Lynn smirked. And I noticed the hug. Robert froze slightly. What hug? The hug, she repeated. The very emotional, very public Lyra hug. Robert looked away. Lynn immediately pointed at him through the hologram. Oh. That reaction means something. Robert sighed again. We're working towards something. Lynn blinked once. Then her expression softened immediately. Seriously? Robert nodded slightly. Yeah. A grin spread across Lynn's face. Well, about time. Robert gave her a tired look. You sound way too happy about this. I am happy about this, she said. You actually sound alive lately. That hit harder than he expected. So Lynn changed subjects before he could overthink it. Do you even know how many people were in that stadium? About 20,000? Lynn pointed dramatically. And now guess how many people watched from home. Robert frowned. A few million? Lynn grinned. Almost 5 billion across the solar system. Robert stared at her. What? Congratulations, Lynn said proudly. You're accidentally famous. Robert slowly leaned back in his chair. I hate that sentence. Lynn laughed so hard she nearly lost hologram stability. Eventually the conversation softened. The two talked another hour about the concert, the ship, the band, Mars Station, and how surreal everything felt now. Finally Lynn smiled warmly. Get some sleep, little brother. Robert smiled faintly. Good night, big sis. The call ended. And for the first time in a long time, Robert fell asleep smiling. The next morning, Robert joined the girls for breakfast in the ship dining hall. Kasia noticed him immediately. And unfortunately, so did Lyra. Which meant Kasia became dangerous instantly. Well, good morning, lovebirds. Lyra nearly choked on her drink. Robert sat down carefully. It is too early for this. It's never too early, Kasia replied cheerfully. Pepper was drinking coffee quietly. Naomi calmly ate breakfast like none of this surprised her anymore. Lyra avoided eye contact for approximately 6 seconds before failing completely and glancing at Robert anyway. Kasia noticed that too. Of course she did. Oich, there it is. Lyra covered part of her face. Kasia, please. No, Kasia replied immediately. Robert looked at Pepper. You just let this happen. Pepper sipped her drink calmly. Resistance has proven ineffective. Naomi nodded once. Data supports this conclusion. Later that afternoon, Robert walked into the ship kitchen. The chef looked up. Oh no, he said immediately. You have an idea. Robert looked mildly offended. I just want to cook lunch. That's how disasters begin. Robert smiled slightly. I need a favor. The chef crossed his arms. Go on. Can one of your assistants grind some earth beef for me? The chef blinked. You're cooking actual Terran food? Old Terran food, Robert corrected. The chef immediately became interested. Continue. I also need about 8 potatoes. The chef grinned now. Oh, this I want to see. The smell alone brought the girls into the dining area before Robert even finished plating the food. Kasia's ears lifted immediately. What is that smell? Robert set down the trays. Hamburgers and French fries. Naomi tilted her head slightly. Ancient Terran meal structure? Very ancient, Robert confirmed. Pepper looked genuinely curious now. Lyra looked fascinated. Kasia pointed dramatically. You can cook too? Robert shrugged. A little. The girls each took a cautious first bite. Then immediately froze. Kasia's tail exploded into motion. Oh my God! Pepper stared at her burger in shock. This is extremely good. Naomi nodded once. High satisfaction response confirmed. Lyra took another bite slowly. Then another. Then looked at Robert with visible surprise. This is amazing. Robert smiled faintly. Glad you like it. Kasia immediately pointed at Lyra with a grin. Well, at least you know your man can cook. Lyra turned bright red instantly. Kasia! Robert nearly inhaled a French fry wrong. Pepper quietly looked away to hide amusement. Naomi calmly took another bite. This explains why ancient Terrans survived emotionally difficult eras, she observed. Comfort food. Kasia laughed loudly. Lyra hid her face again. And Robert, for once, didn't entirely mind the teasing anymore. The days following the Mars concert settled into a comfortable rhythm. For the first time since joining the tour, Robert wasn't just spending time around Lyra. He was spending time with Lyra. Just as they had promised each other. Not as a singer and her protector. Not as a celebrity and the man who had saved her. Just two people learning who the other really was. The first evening found them sitting in Lyra's room. The door was open. Very intentionally open. Because approximately 3 minutes after Robert arrived, Pepper walked by, glanced inside, and immediately said, Keep the door open. Neither of them had been doing anything remotely questionable. Lyra blinked. Robert blinked. Pepper continued walking. Okay, Robert said. Lyra covered her face. She does that. For the next few hours they simply talked. About childhood. About growing up. About family. About the little moments that shape people long before they realize it. Lyra sat curled comfortably on one end of the couch while Robert occupied the other. So what were you like as a child? Lyra asked. Robert laughed. Quiet. That's not surprising. I like taking things apart. Also not surprising. Robert nodded. My parents hated it. Lyra laughed. You broke things? No. A pause. Then, I just never remembered how to put them back together. That made Lyra laugh hard enough that her tail started wagging. What about you? Robert asked. Lyra smiled softly. I sang constantly. Really? Constantly. Her ears lifted slightly as she remembered. My parents couldn't get me to stop. I find that believable. Lyra smiled. I wasn't even trying to be a singer back then. I just liked music. She paused. Then added quietly. Eventually people started telling me I was good. Robert nodded. And they were right. The compliment hit harder than expected. Lyra's ears turned slightly pink. The next day they met in Robert's room. The door remained open. Mostly because they both knew Pepper would check. And exactly 7 minutes later, Pepper walked by. Looked inside. Nodded. Good. Then left. Robert laughed. Lyra groaned. That evening Robert introduced Lyra to another side of Terran music. Not the romantic songs of the 1950s and 1960s. Something entirely different. The Ramones. The Misfits. Punk rock. Fast. Loud. Energetic. Rebellious. Lyra listened carefully. The first Ramones song ended. Then the second. Then a Misfits track. She tilted her head thoughtfully. Huh. Robert smiled. How good or how bad? How interesting. Robert laughed. I'll take it. Lyra listened to another song. Then another. Finally she smiled. I like them. Robert looked surprised. You do? I do. Then she laughed. But I'm still staying with the 50s and 60s. Fair. She pointed toward the speakers. Although. What? I think Cashel would absolutely love this. Robert immediately nodded. Oh, 100%. Lyra's tail swished behind her. Right. Robert grinned. To be completely honest, Kasha makes me think of a punk rock girl. Lyra laughed. I agree. That started both of them laughing. And unfortunately, that was exactly when Kasha walked by. Kasha stopped in the doorway. Why are you both laughing? Neither answered immediately. Kasha narrowed her eyes. What did I miss? Robert pointed at the speakers. Punk rock. Kasha's ears immediately perked up. Oh no. Lyra started laughing again. Kasha pointed dramatically. You are not allowed to discover music that fits me when I'm not present. 3 days into their unofficial get to know each other promise, they found themselves sitting in Robert's room again. The mysterious record sat on the desk nearby. Silent. Uncooperative. Annoying. Robert stared at the restoration screen. No progress. Lyra looked over. Nothing? He shook his head. Nope. The display showed the same answer as before. Insufficient source data. Insufficient source data. Insufficient source data. Robert sighed. I think I know what might work. Lyra perked up. You do? Maybe. What? Robert leaned back slightly. I need equipment that's still on Earth. Lyra nodded. So we wait. Looks that way. For a moment neither spoke. The ship hummed quietly around them. The stars drifted beyond the viewport. Then Lyra smiled softly. I don't mind waiting. Robert looked at her. Neither immediately looked away. For a few seconds the record wasn't important anymore. By the end of the third day, the rest of the band had developed a routine. Pepper periodically checked whether the door was open. Naomi occasionally stopped by to say hello. And Kasia treated the entire situation like a spectator sport. At one point she peeked into Robert's room. Saw Robert and Lyra sitting together listening to music. And immediately announced, "Yep. Still adorable." Lyra buried her face in her hands. "Kasia." "What?" "We're talking." "I know." Kasia grinned. "That's the adorable part." Robert laughed. Lyra somehow turned even redder. Kasia looked incredibly pleased with herself. Then she disappeared down the hallway before either of them could retaliate. And so the pattern continued. 3 days. Stories. Music. Laughter. Shared memories. Small discoveries. No grand confessions. No dramatic declarations. Just two people slowly learning each other. And without either of them realizing it. Those quiet days would become some of the memories they both treasured most. Only 2 days remained before Echoes of Terra would depart Mars Station and begin the long journey toward their next venue on Titan, the largest moon of Saturn. The tour schedule was moving smoothly. The band was happy. The concerts were selling out. And for the first time in a long while, Robert felt like he belonged somewhere. Which was exactly when reality decided to interrupt. The chef had generously surrendered part of his kitchen. Mostly because he was curious. Partly because Robert had spent the last week talking about something called pizza, like it was a sacred artifact. Now the entire band was gathered around the preparation area. Watching. Judging. And occasionally interfering. Robert stood beside Lyra as they worked. Flour covered part of the counter. Dough spun slowly beneath Robert's hands. Lyra was helping arrange toppings. Or at least attempting to. Kasia was making that difficult. "You're standing awfully close." Lyra froze. Robert sighed. Pepper rolled her eyes. Naomi quietly continued observing. Kasia grinned. "I was just making an observation." "No, you weren't," Pepper said. "I absolutely was." "You were teasing." "Correct." The chef laughed. Lyra's ears flattened. "You're impossible." Kasia pointed dramatically. "She's embarrassed." "I am not." Her bright red face suggested otherwise. 20 minutes later the pizzas entered the oven. The smell alone immediately got everyone's attention. Even the chef looked impressed. "What exactly is in this?" Robert shrugged. "Simple ingredients." The chef shook his head. "Simple ingredients don't usually smell this good." When the pizzas finally emerged, silence fell over the room. Everyone took a slice. Then another. Then another. The chef looked personally offended. "I've spent 30 years cooking." Robert blinked. "Thank you?" The chef pointed at the pizza. "Why is this so good?" "I have no idea." Naomi nodded thoughtfully. "This is statistically excellent." Kasia immediately grabbed another slice. "I vote Robert never leaves the kitchen again." Pepper nodded. "Seconded." Lyra smiled proudly. "As his future employer, I support this motion." Robert laughed. "I don't think that's how employment works." Later that evening, after dinner and cleanup were finished, Robert and Lyra settled into one of the ship's common areas. Beyond the large viewing windows, Mars Station glowed against the darkness. The stars seemed brighter this far from Earth. For a while they simply talked. The way they had been doing more and more lately. Comfortably. Naturally. Without effort. "So how did engineering happen?" Lyra asked. Robert smiled. "My father." Lyra nodded. "An engineer too?" "The best one I ever knew." His voice carried quiet admiration. "When I was a kid, he was always building things." "Did he teach you?" Robert laughed. "He tried." "Tried?" "I wasn't very good at first." That surprised her. "You?" Robert nodded. "I didn't become decent until much later." Lyra tilted her head. "Really?" Really? He looked out toward the stars. Some people know what they want early. A small smile appeared. I didn't. What about you? Robert asked. Lyra's tail swayed gently behind her. Singing just felt right. That simple? Actually, yes. She smiled. I tried other things. What happened? I kept ending up back at music. Robert laughed. Fair. It never felt like work. Her ears lifted slightly. It felt like where I belong. The conversation continued naturally. Until Robert's communicator chimed. He glanced at the screen. Lynn. Lyra smiled. You should answer. Lynn? Robert. Her tone immediately told him something was wrong. What happened? It's your apartment. Robert straightened. What about it? The bank. His stomach dropped. Oh no. A few minutes later the situation became clear. Because Robert was gone for months, someone needed authorization to handle various payments and legal paperwork connected to his accounts. Lynn had attempted to arrange everything remotely. The bank refused. Apparently talking to representatives wasn't enough. A physical signature was required. And they had given him 10 days. Robert rubbed his forehead. Darn it. I know. If there was another way, I would have already done it. Robert nodded. I know you would. A pause. Then, I'll come back. You sure? We haven't left Mars yet. He exhaled. I can get to Earth, sign the paperwork, and catch transportation back to Titan. Lynn sounded relieved. Good. Thanks for handling everything. That's what big sisters are for. Robert laughed. You're still not actually my sister. Too late. After another few minutes they ended the call. The common area grew quiet again. Robert slowly lowered the communicator. Lyra already knew the answer. You have to go. It wasn't a question. Robert nodded. Yeah. She looked down briefly, trying not to let her disappointment show. Failing. Her ears lowered slightly. Her tail stopped moving. And when she finally looked back up, her eyes seemed just a little wetter than before. Not crying. Just emotional. You're coming back? The question came out softer than she intended. Robert looked genuinely surprised. Of course. No. She shook her head. You and Lynn live on Earth. A small pause. You're coming back to me. Her ears turned red. Us. Robert smiled gently. I promised, didn't I? Lyra nodded. You did. I'm coming back. For a moment neither moved. Then Lyra stepped forward, wrapped her arms around him, and hugged him tightly. Very tightly. As though she wanted to memorize the feeling. You better. Robert laughed softly. I will. She pulled back slightly. Then, before she could lose her courage, she kissed his cheek. Quickly. Warmly. Immediately turning bright red afterward. Robert froze. Lyra froze. For entirely different reasons. The Vulpine singer looked away first. The kiss was so you don't forget about me. A pause. Then, even quieter. Us. Robert couldn't stop smiling. I don't think that's possible. Lyra's tail immediately began wagging again. Mission accomplished. The next morning arrangements were made. A civilian transport would carry Robert from Mars Station back to Earth. 3 days there. 3 days back. If everything went according to schedule, he would reunite with Echoes of Terra on Titan before the concert preparations were complete. It wasn't ideal. But it was manageable. As Robert boarded the transport vessel, he glanced back one final time. Far above the docking platforms, Mars Station shone beneath the stars. Somewhere inside that station was a certain crimson-haired Vulpine singer who had become very important to him. And for the first time since joining the tour, Robert found himself wishing the trip home would go faster. Because now there was somewhere else he wanted to be. Earth felt different to Robert every time he came back. Louder in a way he couldn't quite explain. Not sound, pressure. Everything moved faster. People spoke faster. Even silence felt temporary, like it was waiting to be interrupted. He sat across from a bank representative while Lynn handled most of the procedural arguments, with practiced efficiency. Robert mostly signed what needed signing, stamped what needed stamping, nodded when told to nod. At one point the banker said something about authorization continuity, and Lynn immediately replied without looking up. "He's not dead. He's just busy." Robert coughed. "Technically accurate," he muttered. Lynn glanced at him. "Don't encourage them." By the end of the second day, everything was finally settled. His bills would continue. His apartment would remain intact. And Lynn looked far too satisfied for someone who had spent the last 48 hours fighting bureaucracy. "All done," she said. Robert exhaled. "Thank you?" Lynn shrugged. "Try not to disappear again without paperwork next time." "No promises." That night, Robert returned to his apartment alone. It felt smaller than he remembered. Or maybe quieter. He set his bag down, then paused. Something clicked in his memory. The record. The old one. He had brought it with him. Robert turned sharply and walked straight into his workroom. There it was. Still intact. Still unresolved. Still waiting. He stared at it for a long moment. Right. The restoration rig hummed softly. Robert loaded the record into the copy interface. The system began its slow analysis. Waveform reconstruction. Material scanning. Audio inference modeling. He leaned back in his chair. 2 hours. That was what the display estimated. He waited. When the timer finally hit 0, the system output read: Audio reconstruction complete. Partial restoration successful. Robert frowned slightly. Partial? He transferred the output to his older record player anyway. Placed the vinyl carefully. Press play. At first, nothing. Just static. A soft, almost mocking hiss. Robert exhaled. Figures. He turned slightly away. Then, a faint sound. A note. Then another. His head snapped back toward the speaker. The static shifted. Organized. Harmonic. And then, a voice. Robert froze. The room didn't feel real anymore. The sound coming from the speakers wasn't just music. It was old. Fragile. Beautiful. Human in a way modern restoration rarely achieved. Then the lyrics began. And Robert's expression changed instantly. Confusion. Recognition. Disbelief. No way. He stepped closer. The song continued. Soft. Haunting. Perfect. His eyes widened slightly. Then wider. Until finally, understanding hit him completely. Unchained melody. He whispered it like it wasn't allowed to exist in his room. Like it shouldn't exist at all. He stood there in silence after the song ended. The last note faded. And the apartment went still again. Robert slowly reached forward, hands steady. This stays secret, he said quietly to himself. Then he copied the file onto a secure data key. And locked it away. Robert exhaled and leaned back. He picked up his communicator. Hey. Lynn answered almost immediately. Done? Yeah. Everything's settled. Good. A pause. Robert hesitated. I'm heading back now. Lynn didn't sound surprised. I figured. Call me when I land? I always do. He smiled slightly. Thanks, Lynn. Don't thank me yet. I still think your life choices are questionable. That's fair. A beat. Then, how's the band? Robert's expression softened slightly. I'll tell you when I get there. Lynn sighed. Of course you will. Then they ended the call. Robert hesitated for only a moment before making the next call. Lyra answered on the second ring. Robert? Just hearing her voice changed something in his posture. Hey. Are you done on Earth? Yeah. I'm coming back. A pause. How long? 3 days. Silence. Not anger. Not complaint. Just quiet processing. Okay, she said softly. Robert's voice lowered slightly. I'll be there soon. Another pause. Then Lyra replied, I'll wait. And that was it. The call ended. But Robert didn't move for a moment afterward. Lyra lowered her communicator slowly. For a moment she just stood there. Still. Quiet. Then she turned and walked down the corridor toward rehearsal. She tried to focus. She really did. But it didn't stick. Her timing was slightly off during warm-ups. She corrected it. Then it drifted again. Naomi noticed first. You're misaligned, she said calmly. I'm fine, Lyra replied immediately. Kasia leaned over from the side. You've checked your communicator 7 times in the last hour. I have not. Pepper didn't even look up. You have. Lyra opened her mouth. Closed it. I'm fine. Kasia smiled. She's in denial. Lyra glared. I am not. Kasia pointed gently toward her. Sure. By the second day, Lyra was quieter. Not withdrawn. Just distracted. She ate less. Missed small cues. Stared slightly too long at empty spaces where Robert usually stood. Pepper finally sighed. You're thinking about him. I'm not. Pepper looked at her. Lyra hesitated. Maybe a little. Kasia leaned in. A little? Lyra sighed. A lot. Kasia nodded like this was extremely obvious. Good. Lyra blinked. That's not helpful. It is emotionally accurate. On the 3rd day, everything changed. Robert called again. Lyra answered instantly. I'm on my way back, he said. Her ears lifted immediately. How long? 3 days. Something in her posture shifted instantly. Like a weight had been quietly lifted without her noticing it had been there. Okay. Her tail started moving again. Slow at first. Then faster. Robert smiled slightly. I'll see you soon. Lyra hesitated. Then softly. Don't take too long. I won't. The call ended. Lyra stood there for a moment after the screen went dark. Then she exhaled. A real one. Not tense. Not forced. Just relief. Her tail wagged once. Then again. Naomi observed quietly. Emotional stability increasing. She noted. Kasia grinned. She was about to start pining professionally. Lyra groaned. I was not. Kasia pointed at her. You were absolutely starting. Pepper sighed. Go eat something. Lyra hesitated. Then did. That night, Lyra sat alone for a moment in her quarters. The ship hummed softly around her. She looked at the communicator again. Then smiled faintly. 3 days, she whispered. Her tail wagged once. Then again. And for the first time since Robert had left. The countdown didn't feel heavy. It felt manageable. The shuttle descended through Titan's hazy atmosphere in a slow, controlled burn. Outside the viewport, Saturn dominated the sky, silent, massive, watching. Robert stood near the rear of the passenger cabin, hands in his pockets, watching the moon grow closer. 3 days on Earth had solved everything he needed to solve. But not everything he wanted to leave behind. Because now there was somewhere else he was supposed to be. Somewhere waiting. The shuttle docked with a soft mechanical lock. A tone chimed through the cabin. Arrival, Titan Performance Station. Robert exhaled once. All right, he muttered. Back to it. But his heartbeat already knew what was coming. The hatch opened. Cold station air rushed in first. Then sound, movement, distant voices, equipment hum. And then a flash of crimson. Robert! Lyra didn't walk. She ran. Straight off the docking platform, past crew members, past protocol spacing, no hesitation at all. And before Robert had fully stepped down, she reached him. And hugged him. Hard. Immediate. Like she had been holding it in for 3 days and no longer could. Robert caught her easily, arms wrapping around her instinctively. Lyra pressed her face into his shoulder. Her tail moved rapidly behind her, completely unrestrained. "You're back," she said, voice muffled. "I said I would be," Robert replied softly. Lyra pulled back just enough to look at him. Her eyes were slightly wet. Not tears falling. Just emotion sitting too close to the surface. "You were gone too long." "I know." A pause. Then she smiled faintly. "But you came back." Robert nodded. "I did." That was enough for her. She hugged him again, softer this time, but no less certain. Kasia leaned against a nearby railing, arms crossed. "Well?" she called out. "Earth Boy survives." "Impressive." Robert turned slightly, still half in Lyra's embrace. "I was mostly sitting on a chair." Kasia nodded seriously. "Dangerous environment." Pepper exhaled. Naomi simply observed. Kasia pointed. "You bring us anything, or was Earth just a vacation?" Robert reached into his bag. "I brought something." Kasia's eyes lit up immediately. "Yes." He handed out 4 small wrapped boxes. Kasia opened hers immediately. "Oh. Chocolate. Excellent decision-making." Pepper inspected hers briefly. "Acceptable." Naomi gave a small nod. Lyra held hers carefully before opening it. Then she looked at Robert. "You didn't have to." Robert shrugged. "I wanted to." Later that evening, the group gathered in a relaxed lounge aboard the station. The energy was lighter now. Familiar. Kasia was already leaning forward. "So, Earth trip. Anything exciting?" Robert sat down. "Mostly paperwork." Kasia groaned. "Disappointing." Lyra sat down beside him again. "Close. Not subtle. Not trying to be. Just there." Robert noticed. He didn't move away. Pepper sighed quietly like she was already used to it. Naomi observed everything like Data. It was Naomi who mentioned it first, 2 days later during rehearsal scheduling. "Lyra's birthday occurs in 48 hours, she said casually. Kasia froze. "You're just saying that now?" Lyra shrugged. "It's not important." Kasia pointed at her. "It is absolutely important." Pepper gave a small nod. "It is logistically relevant for performance scheduling." Lyra sighed. "I said it's fine." Kasia leaned back. "That's what people say right before they expect emotional damage from their friends." Lyra groaned. "That is not happening." Kasia smiled. "It is now emotionally scheduled." Robert had been quiet during the exchange. Not distracted. Just thinking. 2 days. Lyra's birthday. And the concert on Enceladus. Same day. A full performance night. A public stage. And something personal happening at the same time. He leaned back slightly. "Okay," he murmured to himself. That was enough time. Time to do something properly. Not rushed. Not improvised. Something meaningful. Lyra didn't notice Robert's expression change. She was laughing at something Kasia said now. Her tail moved gently. Relaxed. Happy. But Robert wasn't watching the conversation anymore. He was already thinking ahead. Quietly. Carefully. Because birthdays mattered. And Lyra didn't seem like someone who ever asked for anything. So whatever he gave her, it had to mean something. 2 days. Then Enceladus. Then the concert. Then Lyra's birthday. And for Robert Clark, that meant one thing. He had exactly 2 days to figure out how to turn a night on a distant moon into something she would never forget. The tour's ship moved steadily through space. Most of the crew treated it as another transit. Another destination. Another concert. For Robert Clark, it felt very different. Because for the first time since joining Echoes of Terra, he was keeping a secret. And it was becoming harder every day. The first training session happened in an empty rehearsal room. Only Naomi and Robert were present. Naomi sat behind a keyboard while Robert stood awkwardly in the center of the room. This feels ridiculous, he admitted. Naomi nodded. It is. Robert blinked. That wasn't encouraging. It was honest. Robert sighed. Fair. Naomi tapped a few notes. Sing. Robert immediately looked uncomfortable. Just like that? Just like that. Robert rubbed the back of his neck. Then quietly began singing. The first few lines were rough. Not bad. Just nervous. His voice tightened. His breathing wasn't consistent. And he stopped halfway through. Naomi made a note on her tablet. You stopped. I noticed. Do not stop next time. Helpful. I try. After an hour, Naomi finally understood the issue. It wasn't singing. Robert could sing. Everyone already knew that. The problem was being watched. Again, Naomi said. Robert sighed. Then sang. Halfway through, Naomi stood up and walked behind him. Robert immediately stumbled over a lyric. Naomi nodded. There. Robert frowned. There what? You noticed me moving. So? You stopped focusing on the song. Robert crossed his arms. What does that have to do with stage fright? Naomi sat back down. Everything. She set the tablet aside. Most performers make the same mistake. Robert looked up. What mistake? They perform for the audience. A pause. Don't. Robert frowned. Then who am I singing for? Naomi's expression remained calm. One person. Silence. Then, judging by your situation, that should not be difficult. Robert immediately knew who she meant. Naomi knew he knew. Either of them acknowledged it. The next session contained 10 people. Crew volunteers. Technicians. Maintenance workers. One cook. And a very confused cargo specialist. Robert almost walked back out the door. Nope. Naomi pointed toward the center of the room. Yes. There are people. I am aware. They are watching. That is the purpose. Robert groaned. The room laughed. Which somehow made it worse. The first attempt went poorly. The second was only slightly better. The third was acceptable. By the end of the session, Robert wasn't comfortable. But he wasn't terrified anymore. And that counted as progress. By the third day, the rest of the band noticed. Especially Kasia. Kasia noticed everything. She cornered Pepper during lunch. Why is Naomi spending so much time with Robert? Pepper looked up from a security report. I don't know. Kasia narrowed her eyes. You know. No. You absolutely know. No. Kasia stared at her. Pepper stared back. Neither moved. Finally, Kasia pointed dramatically. You're protecting a secret. Pepper returned to her report. I neither confirm nor deny anything. Kasia gasped. That's a confirmation. Across the table, Lyra looked confused. Maybe they're discussing security procedures. Kasia slowly turned toward her. Naomi. Pause. The drummer. Another pause. Discussing security. Lyra considered this. Fair point. That evening, Robert found himself walking the observation deck alone. Saturn glowed in the distance. Enceladus was visible ahead. Small. Bright. Beautiful. And getting closer. Footsteps approached behind him. Lyra. Of course. She stopped beside him. For a few moments neither spoke. They simply watched the stars. Then Lyra smiled softly. 2 more days. Robert nodded. 2 more days. You've been busy. A little. She tilted her head. Working on something? Robert froze internally. Only slightly. Maybe. Lyra's ears perked forward. Something secret? Possibly. Now her tail swayed. Oh no. What? You're smiling. Robert immediately stopped smiling. That only made her laugh. Later that night, Naomi found Robert in the rehearsal room again. Empty. Quiet. Just the two of them. Robert finished the final line. The room fell silent. Naomi considered him carefully. Then she closed her tablet. Robert looked nervous. Well? Naomi nodded once. You're improving. Robert waited. And? Naomi's expression remained completely serious. You still think you're going to fail? Yes. Good. Robert blinked. What? Naomi stood. Confidence is useful. She walked toward the door. Overconfidence is dangerous. She paused before leaving. Then looked back. For what you want to do? A small smile appeared. One of the rare ones. You're ready enough. And for the first time since agreeing to this idea, Robert believed she might be right. Because in 2 days, on Lyra's birthday, he was going to step onto a stage in front of thousands of people. Not because he wanted attention. Not because he wanted applause. But because there was one person in the entire solar system he wanted to sing for. And that made the fear worth facing. The approach to Enceladus Station was always quiet in a way that didn't feel natural. Space never actually became silent, but here, it felt like it was holding its breath. The shuttle drifted through the final docking corridor, its lights reflecting off the ice-blue structure of the station ahead. Massive rings of reinforced alloy curved around docking arms like ribs around a heart. And beyond it all, Saturn. It filled the viewport like a god that had never stopped watching. Its rings stretched across the blackness in pale gold and silver bands, glowing faintly as reflected sunlight scattered through them. Even after months of travel, even after Mars Station and Titan, it still made people go quiet. Robert stood near the front of the shuttle, hands loosely at his sides, watching the station grow larger. Lyra stood slightly behind him. Not speaking. But not still. Her tail moved more than usual. Small flicks of energy she wasn't fully controlling. Kasia noticed immediately. Oh, Kasia said, leaning toward Pepper. It's that day. Pepper didn't look up from her tablet. Yes. Kasia grinned. Birthday mode. Lyra turned her head slightly. I don't have a mode. Kasia nodded seriously. You do now. The shuttle connected with a firm clunk. Lights shifted from travel amber to station white. Docking complete, Enceladus Performance Complex. The doors opened. Cold station air rushed in. And with it, sound. Not chaos. Not panic. Anticipation. Outside the docking bay, fans had already gathered behind controlled barriers. Hundreds at first glance. Then thousands as the corridor extended further. Different species. Different worlds. Different languages. But all in one shared direction. Echoes of Terra had arrived. And so had Robert Clark. The moment Robert stepped onto the platform, his posture changed. Not visibly at first. But internally. He scanned. Automatically. Professionally. Security routes. Emergency access points. Barrier integrity. Camera angles. Crowd spacing. Pepper stepped up beside him without being asked. Security feed is green across all sectors, she said quietly. Robert nodded once. Perimeter access? Locked. Station authorities upgraded protocols after Mars. Good. A pause. Pepper glanced at him. You're doing it again. Doing what? Thinking like a shield instead of a guest. Robert didn't answer immediately. Then, old habit. Pepper gave a faint hum. Try not to forget you're allowed to enjoy this one. Robert almost smiled at that. Almost. Behind them, Lyra stepped forward slightly. She had been unusually quiet during the docking. But now, she was looking out at the crowd. At the banners. At the lights. At the names being shouted through the barriers. And then, someone shouted hers. Then another voice. Then a wave. Lyra! Echoes of Terra! And mixed into it. Robert! Kasia immediately leaned toward him. Oh wow, she said. You have fans now. Robert didn't look away from the crowd. That's concerning. Pepper sighed. It's expected. Kasia grinned. Famous knife guy. Robert closed his eyes briefly. I regret that title. Lyra wasn't listening anymore. She had stepped closer to the edge of the platform. Not crossing it. Just near it. Her ears lifted slightly as the sound of her name washed over her. And then she smiled. Softly. Not the stage smile. Something smaller. More personal. It's my birthday, she said quietly. Kasia immediately reacted. Oh no. Lyra blinked. What? Kasia pointed at her. That's dangerous wording. Pepper nodded. It implies expectation of emotional consequences. Lyra frowned. I'm just saying it's my birthday. Kasia leaned in. And I'm saying that means something is going to happen. Lyra sighed. It already is happening. We're arriving. Kasia shook her head. That's only the tutorial. Robert finally looked back toward Lyra. She was watching the crowd again. But differently now. Not as a performer. Not as a celebrity. As someone noticing how many people had shown up just to exist in the same moment as her. And for a second, her tail stopped moving entirely. Then restarted. Faster. Kasia noticed. Oh yeah, she whispered. She's excited. Pepper didn't look surprised. She should be. Robert watched her for a moment longer than necessary. Then quietly said, Happy birthday. Lyra turned toward him immediately. Like she had been waiting for that exact sentence. Her expression softened. Thank you? A pause. Then, quieter. I'm glad you're here for it. Robert nodded once. I wouldn't miss it. Lyra's ears tilted slightly forward at that. Her tail flicked once. Fast. Kasia leaned back. Oh yeah, she muttered. This is going to be a problem later. Pepper sighed. I agree. Kasia smiled. I'm excited. The station crew began guiding them forward. Security escorts formed a soft corridor through the docking bay. Robert fell into position automatically. Pepper matched him on the opposite side. Lyra stayed just behind them. But close. Always close. Kasia and Naomi followed behind, already talking about stage logistics. And as they moved toward the inner corridor leading to the Performing Arts Dome, Saturn remained visible through the station's transparent structural windows. Still watching. Still massive. Still silent. Like it already knew something important was about to happen. The Performing Arts Dome on Enceladus wasn't just a venue, it was a controlled ecosystem. Sound-dampened corridors curved like veins through the structure. Light panels adjusted automatically to match performance cycles. Entire sections of the station were rerouted to keep backstage areas isolated from crowd pressure. To most performers, it felt like preparation. To Robert, it felt like containment. Not unsafe. Just structured in a way that left very little room for unpredictability. Which, unfortunately, didn't help his nerves. Echoes of Terra were assigned a shared preparation suite near the main stage access corridor. Multiple rooms branched off a central lounge space. Costume racks. Instrument storage. Holographic setlists floating in midair. And a constant hum of pre-show energy from the building itself. Kasia had already claimed a couch. Pepper was reviewing final security confirmations. Naomi stood near a console, checking performance readiness data with calm focus. Lyra was in a separate mirrorlit room adjusting her outfit for the night, unaware of anything unusual being planned beyond the concert itself. And Robert was standing near the far wall, pretending to read a technical schematic that he had already read 3 times. Naomi noticed first. She always did. She walked over quietly, stopping beside him. You are not reading that, she said. Robert didn't look up. I might be. No. You are not. A pause. Robert exhaled. Is it obvious? Naomi nodded once. Yes. Robert lowered the schematic slightly. I'm fine. Naomi raised an eyebrow. That is statistically unconvincing. Robert almost laughed, but it came out as a short breath instead. I've done the checks. Twice. Security is solid. Systems are stable. Stage structure is reinforced. Emergency protocols are updated. Naomi listened. Then, you are listing things. Yes. That means you are not calm. Robert finally looked at her. I know. Naomi studied him for a moment. Then said simply, You are not afraid of the venue. Robert hesitated. Naomi continued, You are afraid of being seen. That landed differently. Not sharply. Just accurately. Robert didn't respond right away. Then, Yeah. Naomi nodded like that confirmed something she already knew. You will perform anyway. Robert gave a small, humorless smile. I don't really have a choice. Naomi corrected him. You do. A pause. You just don't like the other options. From across the room, Kasia was watching. She hadn't interrupted. Not yet. But she had noticed the posture shifts. The pacing. The quiet breathing adjustments. The way Robert kept checking exits that didn't need checking. Kasia leaned toward Pepper. He's doing it again. Pepper didn't look up. Doing what? Kasia tilted her head toward Robert. The internal panic loop thing. Pepper sighed. He does that before big shows. Kasia grinned. No, she said. This is different. Pepper finally glanced over. How? Kasia's grin softened slightly. This one matters more. Pepper didn't respond immediately. Then, yes. Kasia leaned back. I'm going to fix it. Pepper immediately looked alarmed. No. Kasia stood. Yes. Pepper stood too. Kasia. But Kasia was already moving. Lyra stepped out of her dressing area just as Kasia passed the hallway. Where are you going? Lyra asked. Kasia didn't slow down. Psychological maintenance. Lyra blinked. That is not a real task. Kasia waved a hand. It is in my system. Then she was gone. Lyra frowned slightly, then looked toward the lounge. Robert was still standing near the wall. Naomi was beside him now, speaking quietly. Lyra watched for a moment. Something about the scene made her pause. Not concern. Just attention. Then she smiled faintly and turned away again. She had no idea anything unusual was coming. Not yet. Naomi stepped back from Robert. You will be fine, she said. Robert gave a small nod. I know. Naomi paused. You do not believe that. Robert didn't deny it. Kasia re-entered the room at that exact moment. She clapped once. All right. Everyone turned. Kasia pointed at Robert. You. Robert blinked. Me? Yes. I'm busy being nervous. Kasia ignored that completely. Come with me. Pepper immediately stepped forward. Kasia, no. Kasia pointed at Pepper without looking at her. Yes. Naomi sighed softly. This is not a recommended intervention method. Kasia smiled. Noted. Then she looked at Robert again. Walk. Robert hesitated. Then, against his better judgment, he followed. Kasia led him away from the main dressing area into a quieter corridor lined with ambient light panels. Less noise. Less movement. More space. She stopped. Robert stopped too. What is this? He asked. Kasia leaned against the wall. This is me fixing your brain. That sounds medically inaccurate. It's emotionally accurate. Robert sighed. I don't need fixing. Kasia tilted her head. You're shaking your shoulders slightly every time you think about going on stage. Robert immediately stopped moving. Kasia pointed. That. Robert looked away. I hate that you notice things. I love that I notice things. A pause. Then Kasia's voice softened slightly. You're not scared of singing. Robert looked at her. Kasia continued. You're scared of failing in front of her. That word didn't need clarification. Robert didn't answer. Because he didn't have to. Kasia pushed off the wall. Bad news. Robert looked up. What now? Kasia grinned again. You're still going on stage. Robert exhaled. That is consistent with my expectations. Kasia pointed back toward the dressing rooms. And she has no idea what you're planning. Robert paused. That's the point. Kasia nodded. Good. Then she started walking back. Robert followed. After a moment, he asked, Was that supposed to help? Kasia glanced back at him. No. Then what was it supposed to do? Kasia smiled. Make you stop spiraling alone. Robert didn't respond. But he walked a little steadier after that. As they returned, Lyra was now speaking with Naomi about stage timing. Pepper was reviewing final security routes again. The concert countdown had begun. Everything was moving forward. Normal. Controlled. Ready. Lyra looked up as Robert returned. Everything okay? She asked. Robert hesitated. Then nodded. Yeah. Lyra smiled. Good. And just like that. She went back to preparing for the show. Still unaware that tonight was not going to be a normal performance. Not even close.